Got the first reading of the Treaty Principles Bill tomorrow. How are you feeling ahead of it?
Oh, I look very excited. I think a lot of people have wanted this debate to happen for a long time. Now we're going to see it, and the critical change is that actually everybody who has to live under our constitutional settings has an equal say on it through this process. That's a big change from the way that the understanding of the treaties evolved in the last 50 years. So, pretty excited.
Are you disappointed the Prime Minister won't be there for the first reading?
Oh no, look, it's important that he's off at APEC. Not everyone can be there for every debate, but nonetheless, what's important is that he's the Prime Minister in a government that is supporting this debate to happen, and that's critical.
What do you make of the progress of the Hīkoi so far?
Oh, look, I'm just pleased that everyone looks like they're having a good time. It's been done safely. I think that the interruption to people, particularly during a time of school exams, is unfortunate. But, they make their own decisions about when they choose to cross the bridge. I would have done it a bit later in the day out of respect to other people, but that's a choice they have to make.
If you could make a final pitch to the opponents of the Treaty Principles Bill, what would it be?
Oh, they say kill the bill. I say read the bill, because once you see it, ask yourself, what's wrong with the government having the right to govern, the government having an obligation to uphold all people's rights and all people's rights being equal before the law. I don't think the people who are protesting can explain what it is that they're opposed to. They like to say that this is going to take away the Māori language and culture. There's not a chance. There's no way it can do that. They say it undermines treaty settlements. It explicitly says that it doesn't affect treaty settlements. They say it's going to take us back to the 1950s. I mean, I wish I had time-travelling powers, but I don't. All it's going to do is give us a clear understanding of what the principles of the treaty mean and how our country should go forward. And what's more, it's going to allow us to solve the very real and tangible problems with health and housing, the economy that people face, particularly Māori face. It's a lot easier to get stuff built if you don't have this requirement to ask people simply based on what their ancestry was. It's a lot easier to run an education system or a healthcare system if you don't have it split into two, as we did until very recently in the case of health. So if you want to solve the real problems in New Zealand, this is the bill to get behind.
Considering all those things, why is Christopher Luxon not supported?
I think that's a good example of why you need an ACT party. It's why MMP and coalition government can have real strength. This wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for the ACT party. However, I remember once upon a time when the National Party was opposed to 3 strikes. I remember they weren't that keen on charter schools when we first introduced those. Now charter schools are one of the best ideas the National Party's ever had.
Do you think the opposition shows they don't support those things you talked about, like equal rights?
No, I think that they are perhaps less keen on taking on a tough issue, and that's always been true. ACT is a party that will take on hard issues, and often, like 3 strikes, like charter schools, give it a few years and the National Party says, best thing we ever thought of. And we're quite happy, because we know there's no limit to what you can achieve if you don't care who takes the credit.
What is your plan for when the Hīkoi lands in Pāti?
Well, it's a fluid situation. I mean, I said I'd be happy to talk to them, but then they said in Te Reo Pāki we can't talk to him because he doesn't speak Te Reo Māori. So some mixed messages coming out there, but I remain open to talking to anyone.
Don't you speak to them?
Oh,
You know a little bit of Reo Māori, don't you?
well, apparently not enough for these guys, but I try.
So you're open to meeting with
I'm
them?
absolutely open to meeting.
Will
Yeah.
you go out onto the full court?
Highly likely. We'll just see what the circumstances are. I mean, I'm not going to commit to doing something that I don't exactly know what it'll look like yet, but in principle, why not?
And just your comments about the National Party maybe coming around in the end. It sounds like you're playing the long game on this.
Yeah, I am. Look, and I just make the comparison. Some people say, well, why are you doing this bill if it's not going anywhere? But it's the people who say it's not going anywhere that are the most determined to stop it from going anywhere. And the reason is they know that we're giving everyone a say on something that until now only a small group of New Zealanders have really had an influence on. Democratising the debate about the treaty is a major change. The second thing is, I look at something like homosexual law reform. First started in the early 70s. People said, oh, why are you doing that? Waste of time, focus on the economy. 15 years later it became legal and we'd never think about going back.
Do you really think all the people protesting just haven't read the bill and don't understand it? Is it not the case that they may have read the bill and they just still don't agree?
Well, I can only go by the rhetoric that's coming out of it. which can't be supported by the bill. So saying it's an assault on the Māori language and culture, that's just not true. There is no reason that the bill that supports the rights of hapu and iwi Māori as at 1840 wouldn't continue to support the Māori language and culture. It also says we support everybody's rights, and I think that that's actually a big progression. It actually enhances the mana of the treaty, and it enhances the rights of all people.
Is it true that the treaty doesn't support the rights of hapu and iwi of today? It's only specifically those people that signed back in 1840?
Well, it says the Crown respects and protects the rights that hapu and iwi Māori had in 1840. Obviously, the way these things work is that evolves. So, for example, at one point, the right to language came to mean the right to some radio spectrum share. So you can imagine that kind of thing continue to evolve. Yeah. Well, it does. It's just a complicated way of answering it, I suspect.
Could you answer it in a more simplistic way?
Yeah, is that people's rights evolve. So rights to language, for example, is a right that those signatories had in 1840. That's preserved, but it's changed. And for example, in the late 1980s, early 1990s, it actually gave claimants a share of radio spectrum, which is how we got the iwi radio network.
David Seymour, why won't charter schools have to meet the same attendance and achievement standards as state schools?
Because they're going to be contracted on pain of being shut down. So we contract these schools and say, if you don't reach these targets, we'll shut you down. Whereas the targets that other schools have, they don't face being shut down if they don't meet them.
So, but what does that mean for the students that are not meeting the target, but the school is meeting the target enough that they're not going to be shut down? Will they fall through the cracks?
So you're talking about the students in the state schools or charter schools?
The charter schools.
Well,
so what impetus do charter schools have for all students if, that's the system?
Well, I mean, you're really just arguing about statistics. I mean, any system, if you say that we need an average attendance of 90%, there's going to be some students under 90%, but that's true in any type of school. So I don't know if that's, I don't quite follow that, but look, I think the real difference is, we're setting high targets for state schools, but if a state school doesn't achieve the target, there's no real consequence. Whereas a charter school, if they don't meet their contractual outcome, we'll actually shut them down. That's a lot different.
You're also using social barriers, EQIs?
Yep.
But races and ethnicities are part of the EQI. Do you not see hypocrisy there with your values?
If you look at the EQI, it has 38 different variables, and so when you do a regression analysis, it's the variables that actually make a difference when you've accounted for everything else that count. Now, if ethnicity is truly a barrier, then even after you allow for parental education, rural and urban living, socioeconomic status, previously been visited by WINS, previously engaged with OT, and all the other 38 variables in the EQI, then sure, you can have ethnicity. And that's actually consistent with the government's Need Not Race circular that the ACT Party championed, because it says you can use ethnicity, you just have to consider everything else first.
Okay, so you're comfortable with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. See you guys.